So welcome to the Middle East Teaching and Learning Conference. I'm Nadine Powrie. I am an international education specialist and also an executive and leadership coach. So I'm delighted to be here with you today to share my presentation on the role of hope in coaching conversation to elevate leadership performance. So in this presentation, I'm obviously going to be asking you a first question, which is, what are you hoping to get from my presentation? And notice that I've got the word hope in there. So just think about it for a few seconds or doodle it on a piece of paper or on your iPad if you've got an iPad in front of you. So there are four parts in my presentation. First of all, we're going to be looking at what hope really means. And to do that, I'm going to be sharing with you the research that I am doing through my doctoral research. We're going to be looking at the difference that hope can make in your leadership conversation. And I guess this is a more of a reaction, a provocation to something that was posted on LinkedIn, which was hope isn't a strategy. So we're going to be examining this. We're going to be looking at the type of questions that hope leaders are asking. And finally, we're going to be looking at how hope can shape your leadership performance, because I have a specific interest in leadership effectiveness and leadership excellence. So when we look at hope and we start to study hope, we always go back to the definition of what hope means. And when we look at the definition, hope means the expectation of something that is desired. So we have to bear in mind a number of different point of views, okay? Because you have the school of philosophy that says, well, expecting something to happen will not make it happen. Okay. You also have the school of thoughts that says, well, if you look back at the work that Piaget, so the development psychologist, did, he did a lot of work on what was called magical thinking, okay? And the magical thinking is when you're young, you're hoping for things to happen. But he clearly concluded that actually a magical thinking, you outgrow it by the age of 7. So that's another school of thought. And then you have the whole law of attraction, and you've probably heard of that, which is the kind of magnetic power of your thoughts that says like attracts like, what you think about, you bring about. So what do you do with all of that? Well, let's have a look. So first of all, we need to go back to the work that Paul Ekman did on emotion, because there's been a lot of debate about is hope an emotion, is hope something else? And when Paul Ekman did his research on emotions, he outlined 6 emotions. So happiness, sadness, fear, disgust, anger, and surprise. Okay, so when you look at those 6 emotions, you can see that hope isn't in there. So my starting point is that hope isn't an emotion. Please, you can disagree with me. You can ask me many questions about that. Hope isn't an emotion. For me, hope is a belief. It comes from an emotion. It is linked to our emotion, but it is a belief that creates possibilities. So that's kind of my starting point. And I read a lot about Richard Lazarus' work, and he's actually done a lot of work on hope, but his research outlined how much hope has been associated with the negative aspect. So we are starting in a deficient mode because a lot more research has been done with hope in relation to our mental health, our mental life, in terms of depression, in terms of even suicide, and anything that is negative with our mental health. So actually what he said in his research, he said that not much research has been done looking at the positive side of hope, looking at that desire, that motivation. And to some extent, when you do research, as I do, you always want to bring something new to the table. So this is why I want to examine how hope it can be used to elevate leadership performance. So what I love about the work that I am doing on hope is that I believe very strongly that hope is rooted in 4 different disciplines: education, communication, business, psychology, maybe more, but for the sake of this presentation, I'm just going to focus on those 4. And when we look at those, there is some interconnectivity, and I want to talk about that. So the first point that I want to make is about hope, the research of hope in education. And hope leads to better performance through adaptive coping behavior. That's what research of hope is in education. So here the key words are the words adapt. So you are adaptively coping when you have hope, and you are using your knowledge, you are using your strengths to adjust. So the 2 key words here are adapt and adjust when you are thinking about hope in education. Then when you are dipping into the world of communication and hopes, the conclusion here of my research, I mean, there's many conclusions, but just for the sake of this presentation, again, I'm just using one aspect, is that hope may have to be hidden to be operative. Now, that's quite fascinating, because here we are diving in the world of verbal and particularly non-verbal communication. When you're a leader, there is so much non-verbal communication. I think 55% is non-verbal communication. But here is the thing. The most powerful tool in social communication is your face. I mean, just look here, right? You can see my face, and you can see the way I look. And from that, you're going to have some perception about me. You're going to make some assumption, and you're going to make and you're going to have some interpretation of what you're seeing here, which is my face. And the thing is, hope can start with what's hidden and what you don't always see, because behind my face, you know, is actually my whole body. I'm quite using a lot of my hand here. So I'm talking about hope in terms of the non-verbal communication, but also the verbal communication. And I want to go back to the work that Tony Robbins, and everybody knows Tony Robbins, which the work that he's done is very famous. And I'm particularly interested in what he said about the language. And here I've put a photo actually of me kind of, you know, looking at hydrangeas, because choosing flowers is almost like choosing your words. And Tony Robbins said that on a daily basis, we use between 200 words to 300 words. So here is me talking about the role of hope in our coaching conversation to elevate leadership effectiveness and your leadership performance. So those 200 to 300 words that you are using on a daily basis are going to be absolutely key for you to be a hope leader. So my question to you is, what are those words that you are using every day? And think about the impact that they are having on others when you are kind of using the hope language. And you may not be aware that you are doing that, but just think for a few seconds, what are those words that you are using? And if you don't know, one of the method of research that I've done to test that is to actually film myself when I've been in meetings, when I've been talking to people, to understand the kind of words that I was using. And that will be, I think, a pivotal moment for you to kind of reflect on those 200 to 300 words. Now, I've talked about the interconnectivity of the world of hope. So I've talked about education, I've talked about communications, and I want to talk about business here, because hope depends on positive feedback. And we all know that. I mean, you are educators, and you know that great feedback enhances thinking and motivation when it's well intentioned, right? When you are explaining how your students can improve by doing, bang, bang, bang. So here you are tapping into positive emotion and hope as a consequence. And remember my hypothesis that hope is a belief. So it's about the impact that you are having when you are giving that feedback. And sometimes we are not always aware of the feedback and of the impact of the feedback that we give, but just think for a second that impact will stay forever with people, obviously, depending on how you are giving that feedback, whether it's a recorded feedback, with a video like I'm doing right now, or whether it is written feedback. So finally, in terms of the 4, domains that I'm looking at and the role of hope in those domains, in psychology, role matching depends on hope. So you're going to wonder, well, what on earth is role matching? Well, to some extent, when we are a hope leader, it's a little bit like having a job description, right? And we all applied. You have to apply to be a hope leader. You have to apply, and you have to match that job description. And you have to do 3 things, right? First of all, you need to have focused thoughts, like I'm doing now. You must develop strategies in order to achieve those goals. So you have some thoughts, you have goals, and you have to be motivated to make the efforts, to make the required efforts to reach these goals. And that's the whole work of Snyder in his book, which I would encourage you to read, The Psychology of Hope. So then we go and we turn to hope and leadership conversation, which is the second part in my presentation. And I'm pretty clear in my head that there are 2 types of conversations, the informal conversations and the formal conversations. So the formal conversations are, exchange of information between you and your colleagues in a predefined channel. It can be a webinar, it can be a face-to-face meeting with rules, protocols, agenda, and a timeline. Like, for example, I know that this presentation is going to last about 35 minutes. So that's kind of a formal context. But you also have everything that is out of the formal context conversation, which I call the informal conversations that yet can have a huge impact on people. And hope doesn't just happen. You are not a hope leader just having formal conversations. You are a hope leader having informal conversations. So, those conversations in the corridors, in the school, on the playground, when it's break time and you're on duty with your colleagues, you're talking to the students, and when you are, in the cafe culture, when you're at the canteen, when you're in the bathrooms, or even on the car park. So the point I want to make here is that, remember that job description, okay? Well, that job description, you have to be a hope leader anywhere. It's kind of 24 hours a day, and anywhere, at any time. And that's when you know that you are really a hope leader, because it's organic and it's part of who you are. Now, of course, the conversation that you are having as a hope leader, you're having them with people, formally or informally, but you can also have them with yourself. That kind of pep talk when you're a leader, you're giving yourself a pep talk, you're in your office and you're just in between meetings, and you are talking to yourself, you're asking yourself some questions. And the question might be, who am I? And who do I want to be as a leader? And what are my feelings as a leader? I mean, I've written here, I've put down some questions that could help you ground and be grounded as a hope leader. And those questions may help you become a reflective practitioner, because a hope leader is a reflective practitioner. If you are like me, you're going to be analyzing everything you do, everything you say, and you're going to be reflecting, what did I do well? And what are my feelings? Have I been surprised today? I mean, when I was a head teacher, I would always ask my staff, please surprise me, let's be innovative, let's be creative. Or you might be journaling, because you might want to put your thinking into writing. You might be one of those leaders who likes to do mind mapping and using colors and the psychology of colors, whatever. By doing and by having those conversations here with yourself, you are elevating your leadership performance. Now, of course, there are questions that you will want to ask to others when you are leading and when you are a hope leader. And that's my kind of third part in this presentation. And here I want to talk about the importance of the semantic. The semantic being the meaning of language. And we know that the semantic is at the level of words, phrases, sentences, and sometimes a whole unit of discourse. So I've shared with you some examples of questions that I was asking my senior leadership team when I was meeting them on a one-to-one in their one-to-one meeting on a weekly basis. And I was asking them the same questions. And those questions were the one that you can see on the screen. So I'm just going to leave you to read them just for a few seconds. And when you read them, you will see the language of hope and the seeds of the language of hope in those words, in those phrases, in those sentences. Look at the words: change, high-level successes, leveraging strengths, new ideas, growth. Being passionate, achieving, feeling great, being resilient, legacy. I mean, my favorite question is, what is your legacy? I mean, we're all here, educators, to make a difference to the life of those kids that we are working with every day. So what is your legacy? And imagine having the conversation with your team, even as a team or on a one-to-one, and listening to what your colleagues are saying. Isn't that going to lift off? It's a bit like a rocket. You are lifting off your colleagues' capabilities, and you are enhancing the leadership performance by asking those questions. So you change your words, you change everything. And you know what? When I do presentation, I like to think that I actually lead by example, and I walk the talk, and I'm quite well known for that, actually. I love walking the talk. So there isn't one thing I'm going to ask you to do in my presentation that I haven't done myself. So here I want to share with you how I am using the language of hope, and how I'm being myself a hope leader as part of my company, Nadine Powrie Consultancy. So what I've done is I've had a meeting with myself and my co-directors, Professor Phil Powrie, my husband, and we've looked at the nouns and the verbs and adjectives that we wanted to associate NP consultancy with. So we've put those words under the microscope, and those words actually reflect the language of hope that we are using when we are working with leaders. So we are not only using those words, those noun, verbs and adjectives, but we're actually demonstrating the behaviors of that language in our communication, in our verbal and non-verbal communication, in our behavior. So all of those words, and as you've been listening to me for the past 20-25 minutes, you've heard me talk about those words. There are words that I have shared with you in my presentation. Not all of them, okay? And it's not about a memory exercise here, despite the fact that as a bilingual person, I am fascinated by memory, short-term, medium-term, and long-term. Here, it's not about that. It's about making sure that you walk the talk. So as a hope leader, I hope that by using this specific language, I hope that it is enhancing your thought, I hope I am being thought provocative and making you reflect on the language that you are using. And hopefully, you are elevating your performance through the process, through the language, through your behavior. And I want to talk about your leadership performance, because after all, right, we want to achieve leadership excellence. And here I am massively influenced and inspired by somebody called Simon Harmer. And Simon is a director of a creative agency in the south of England. And he was a guest on my podcast. So if you go onto my website, nadinepowrie.com, and if you look at my podcast, go on podcast 60, because we had a conversation, I think it was about a 45 minutes conversation on disruptive leadership, right? And I believe very strongly that hope leaders are disruptive leaders, but disruptive leaders isn't a bad thing, disruptive leaders are about innovation, are about creativity. So we're not being disruptive for the sake of negativity. We are disruptive because we are constantly asking ourselves, is there a better way? How can I create new ideas? And what's the risk of not changing? And those are the questions that you can ask yourself, that pep talk you're having with yourself, or indeed with your teams, or in your one-to-one meeting. And you can journal your thinking. You can also ask people how they are perceiving you. I mean, one of the activity that I did with my senior leadership team is I asked them to share with me how they were perceiving me as a hope leader. Well, I knew I was a hope leader, but I was hoping, and that was kind of a cross-reference exercise, I was hoping that they would see me as I am, right? And those are the 4 words that they came up with: transparent, driven, inspiring, thoughtful. And those, for me, are part of my language as a hope leader. So it's about synchronicity, it's about triangulation, and it's about being who you want to be as a leader. So I hope I am putting some seeds here to make you grow and to make you think about who do you want to be as a leader, and who are you when you are at your best as a leader. And finally, I'm going to leave you with this little exercise to do, which is audience digestion. So you can map out how you want to influence as a hope leader. And this is an exercise that I would do when I am preparing for meetings, for example. So the first thing is you choose your channels. So that's what's on the left-hand side. So, are you going to be communicating by social media, or are you going to be having a one-to-one meeting, or is it a workshop, is it a webinar, but choose your channel and then think about how you need your stakeholders to think, to feel, to say, and what you need them to do using those channels. And think about how you can influence them through your mapping out and through who you are as a hope leader, because what you want to do is you want to elevate, so not more of the same, not more of the, I actually hate what we always do is what we will always get, right? I hate that thing. I am more about the future and the legacy and making a difference. So I hope that I have changed something in you in my presentation. I hope I have convinced you to start a conversation with yourself and with your colleague about becoming a hope leader. If you need the job spec, I am very happy to send it to you. But it's been an absolute pleasure to do this presentation. And you can, of course, ask me any question that you want to ask me now, or if you want to think about it, and if you suddenly have a thought or an idea or a question once my presentation and the Q&A is finished, then you can email me and we can have a conversation. I'd love if you could leave a testimonial on LinkedIn, because I'm on LinkedIn. But for now, very, very open to answering the questions that you may have. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. And let's get down to the questions now.